Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Friday's morning devotional. You know that when you see me, the weekend is nearly upon you. And as the advert used to say, thank Crunchy, it's Friday. So today is Mark 10, verses 35 to 41. Good. Nobody's shaking their head. I've got the passage correct. Jesus teaches about serving others. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do us a favor. What is your request? He asked. They replied, when you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left. But Jesus said to them, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I'm about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering I must be baptized with? Oh, yes, they replied, we are able. Jesus told them, you will indeed drink from my bitter cup and be baptized with my baptism of suffering. But I have no right to say who will sit on my right or on my left. God has prepared those places for the ones he has chosen. When the 10 other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they were indignant. Right, okay, my reading of this is that this is a story about wanting the glory without realizing that glory has to be earned. And has to be, it has to be earned. I don't think I can give any other words than that. James and John did not realize that going to the top and receiving the honors and plaudits did not come with a free pass. There are those who crave recognition and those who don't. Now, I think some of you know that my mother was stationed at Bletchley Park in 1943. She assisted the code breakers. She started in 1943 and finished in 1946 at the end of the war. She operated the code breaking machines, Bombay machines they were called, under the direction of people like Alan Turing and Gordon Welshman and their teams in what was called Hut 6. She worked in an area known as Block C. The park itself, I think you know, is now a museum, and Block C has been converted into the main entrance. Now, did she receive an honour for her work there? Well, yes, she did in the form of a certificate, but that was awarded in 2012. Only problem was she had passed away 2 years earlier in 2010. So the honour came just a little bit too late for her. As for her, she fully bought into the secrecy of the work there and never spoke about it when I was growing up. Although she did say a bit more about it in the 1990s, after the work at BP Bletchley Park had been largely declassified. So she did quite a bit of good work during the Second World War, but she received no honours for it whatsoever, and even no honours in her lifetime anyway. But that didn't matter to her. Now, during my working life, I have sometimes been supervised by people who clearly took the job because it had a fancy title, such as manager or foreman. These people, it seems, do not want to pay the price or take responsibility. They just want the position. They want, if you like, to have a cap and a badge, but not the responsibility that goes with it. These people, I found, quite often end up as figureheads, delegating almost all the difficult decisions to the minions below them. And eventually, I found they get found out. So taking responsibility and not carrying out those responsibilities, you ultimately pay a price. Now, in James and John's case, they wanted the honour, but not necessarily realised what the responsibility connected with that honour was. So let me pose some questions. Do you want the recognition without putting in the work? Are you really able to take the extra responsibility for the sake of a title? And most importantly, what is God leading? What is God's leading in all this? And finally, and most importantly, because I've already used most importantly already, what is your motive? Why do you want to do this? Jesus knew what was ahead at this point in his life, and he knows it's not going to be easy. We heard quite a bit about this yesterday from Julian, but his motive was to serve his Father, and nothing else mattered. And isn't that the key to this? It is about serving. Above all else, it is to serve. Now, as a kid, I was brought up in my local parish church, which happened to be St Mary's Bletchley, where I grew up, which in the 1940s hosted many a secret wedding of those in nearby Bletchley Park who were pairing themselves up. Anyway, fast forward a little way to the 1960s when I was at Sunday school, and one of the recited responses was this: teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labour and ask not for reward, save that of knowing that I do your most holy will. Now, some of you may be familiar with that. It is a prayer attributed to Saint Ignatius of Loyola. I'm not quite sure where Loyola is, but it's out there somewhere. And this, I think, is how we should approach matters. Glory? Well, yes, one day. But until then, we need to do God's bidding. And remember this before you want to climb the greasy pole. And again, as we heard yesterday, but to remind you, so those who are last now will be first. Then those who are first will be last. So my mother never sought recognition or glory for what she did in Bletchley Park, and in her lifetime, she never got the rewards or plaudits at all. But that didn't matter to her. Her job was to serve, and that's what she did. Others want the recognition, but don't necessarily want to serve. So let me finish by quoting some distinguished people. The first distinguished person is Julian. Being last is putting the needs of other people first. The second distinguished person is Mark Edison. You are there to serve the people who work for you. And finally, distinguished person number 3, Caroline. God uses humanity in all their imperfectness. God uses your humanity. I think that's what she said. Sorry if I've misquoted you, Caroline. But let me finally finish with one other quote. To lead is to serve. If serving is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. And that's where I'll finish.